I think in my last video, I may not have accurately gotten across the extent to which licensed card games once dominated the landscape. Sure, making a card game based on a popular movie or TV show makes some sense, but I may have undersold just how far companies used to reach when searching for a property to draw from. My name is Craig, and I welcome you to the Dungeon of the Discarded, home of the dead, abandoned, and forgotten games of years past. And this is the dumbest thing I have ever seen. In 1999, Japanese toy companies Takara and Tomy teamed up to release Beyblade, a line of battle tops with interchangeable parts that allowed the player to customize their top to their liking. Like any Battle Tops game, the idea was that two or more players would simultaneously release their tops into an enclosed space, where they would impact into one another, and the last one to stop spinning would be declared the winner. It's a simple concept, but it proved very successful. A manga series, Explosive Shoot Beyblade, written by Takao Aoki, was serialized in CoroCoro Comic at the same time to promote the toys. An anime adaptation soon followed, and in 2002, Hasbro started distributing the toys and the anime worldwide. The series followed a pretty common formula. You've got a young kid who's really enthusiastic about the toy, a cool rival for that kid, some other kids so the story can toss in a surface moral about teamwork and friendship, an endless succession of tournament arcs, and a vague supernatural element to add some kind of stakes to winning. It's really not anything different from all of the other shonen battle toy anime that follow this formula, but Beyblade managed to build up enough of a following to last for 3 seasons, with over 150 episodes, followed by 2 revivals in 2009 and 2016. So between anime viewership and toy sales, that's a pretty successful franchise already. But this is a show about trading card games, so what's the connection? Enter Decipher Incorporated. Decipher is an American tabletop game company best known for their long-running murder mystery dinner game series How to Host a Murder, but in the early 90s they saw the burgeoning trading card game market and decided to throw their hat into the ring. In 1994, the Star Trek customizable card game released a positive reception and decent sales, and it kicked off a series of nearly a dozen different TCGs that Decipher would publish over the next 15 years, nearly all of them based on pre-existing licenses. There were a lot of companies releasing licensed trading card games during this period, but Decipher stood head and shoulders above the rest. Sure, they weren't perfect, but taken on average, their games tended to be more consistently well-designed, with a great attention to detail with regards to accurately representing the feel of the source material. Of course, success couldn't last forever, and by the mid-2000s, declining sales combined with the embezzlement of over $1.5 million to sink Decipher's trading card game division. Licenses started to get pulled and game lines were cancelled. 2008's Fight Club would prove to be their last game. But today, we're going to specifically look at the Beyblade trading card game released in 2003. Beyblade was in the middle of its second season at more or less the peak of its popularity, so it may have looked like a pretty good license to pick up at the time. Except this was already a show that existed to sell toys. Adding a trading card game on top of that just seems redundant to me, but I don't know, look at me, I'm not a business executive. Decipher already had card games based on the immensely popular Star Trek, Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, and even Austin Powers, but these are properties that largely appeal to adults, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Proved that there was a sizable market for more child-oriented trading card games. And so they made a game for babies. The cards look nice at least. The cardstock is good, though not fantastic, and the back isn't too busy despite the whirl of colors. It looks almost like a spinning Beyblade top, which is a really cool touch, definitely the sort of attention to detail you'd expect from Decipher. The frames are nice and efficient at providing needed information, not too plain, but not distracting with too many little details. And the foil cards, oh man, the foil cards, this is some good holofoil. In addition to a shiny frame, they went the extra mile and judiciously applied it to just the right spots in the artwork to enhance the effect. For the most part. But when there are only about a dozen cards in the whole set that even come in foil, I guess that does give you more freedom to do this sort of thing. Speaking of which, there were an additional 14 special promotional cards not available in regular packs, but I don't have any of these. All I could find was a list of them archived from Decipher's old website. It's a little bit awkward having a full-color picture of Tyson down here next to the rarity symbol and collector number on every card. I guess he's supposed to be the set symbol? That's an odd choice, using a character for that. Well, it's not intrusive, at least. As you'd expect, each piece of artwork on these cards is just a still image taken from the show, and these vary pretty wildly in quality. Some look pretty good, others... What is even supposed to be going on here? Oh, picking up speed. How the heck are you supposed to get that from this image? Yeah, this was standard for licensed TCGs, but I'm still always at least a little bit disappointed by the lack of original art. They clearly phoned it in with the packaging, too. Both starter decks have the exact same art, and the only way to tell them apart is this strip at the top. They don't even have names, they're just starter number 1 and starter number 2. You would never know from looking at them that they're supposed to be themed around the characters of Tyson and Kai, respectively. Still, when it comes to the cards, this is probably the best looking game Decipher released. It's definitely their nicest card frame, if nothing else. It's a darn shame I can't give similar praise to the gameplay. This is a kid's game, so deck building is pretty simple. You need at least 60 cards with no more than 4 copies of any one card, and one of your cards naturally has to be a Beyblade. Besides Beyblades, there are 3 other card types: Event, Character, and Action. Your Beyblade starts the game on the board, separated from the rest of your deck. The most important thing on this card is this number in the bottom left, which is your spin strength, basically your starting life total. Every Beyblade card I've seen in this set either has 6 or 7 spin strength, which seems somewhat limiting. Maybe they were planning to add more variety here later and just never had a chance to, but I don't know. It will also have a unique special ability, though these range anywhere from situational to decent to potentially game-breaking. Unfortunately, you won't see much variety because there were only 10 Beyblade cards released in this entire set. 2 more were released as promo cards, but again, I don't have those, and I can only find a picture of one of... Wow, that looks overpowered! Every Beyblade also has this color bar on the bottom, but it isn't hugely important. It's just a bit of quick reference information for when you start playing cards. On the top, you also have a battle edge with 6 spots, some of which will be filled by these silver pieces. Every single card, whether it's a Beyblade, an event, a character, or an action, will have a battle edge, and this is probably the game's most unique and interesting mechanic, but we'll get to that in a moment. Event cards are denoted by this spiral ripcord symbol. They're the most basic card type, being basic one-off effects. However, they don't just hit the board and do their thing unopposed. They need to be tested. When you play an event card, your opponent takes the top card of their deck and places it on the table opposite the event. You line up the battle edges and compare the pieces. If one of the spots is filled on both cards, that's a hit, and the event card activates, does its thing, and then both cards are discarded. But if there are no hits, then the test has failed and both cards are discarded to no effect. Some cards will have these red or black pieces which add a small amount of complexity to this system. Red live pieces count toward hits only during your turn and are ignored during your opponent's turn, while black empty pieces are the opposite. So basically, live pieces are better to have than silver pieces, while empty pieces are something you want to avoid. Character cards are signified by a fist symbol, and they're similar to event cards. You put them on the board, test them against the top card of your opponent's deck, and discard them if they fail the test. However, unlike event cards, character cards aren't just one-off effects. If a character card passes its test, it stays on the board and provides a permanent effect as long as it's there. You can only have 1 copy of a given character in play at a time though, so no stacking 4 Ms. Kincaids for functional immortality for you. Action cards, marked by a spinning Beyblade symbol, are how you initiate a battle between your Beyblade and your opponent's. But I'll get to that. Action cards also have unique effects, but those fall into 2 categories. Effects with this hand of cards symbol trigger as soon as you play the card, and effects with this trophy symbol activate only if you win the battle using that specific card. If you play another card after it, the effect doesn't activate. Some effects can also only be used during your turn or your opponent's turn. At the start of the game, you set down your Beyblade, then take cards from the top of your deck equal to your spin strength and set them in a pile underneath it. After that, draw a hand of 5 cards and begin play. During your turn, you can play 1 card, whether it's an event, character, or action. If it's an event or character, it's tested and then the turn is over. However, if it's an action card, then a battle begins, and this is where the game gets weird. As you may have already noticed, the color of the card frame is not used to differentiate a character card from an event card or an action card or anything, and all 3 types come in all 4 colors. It's an entirely separate, seemingly random thing. While color is only occasionally relevant for characters and events, you might have an effect that only affects yellow characters, for example, it's immensely important for action cards. When you play an action card, your opponent has the chance to stop it with an action card of their own. But depending on the color of your card, they need to use a specific color to stop it. The color bar on the bottom of the Beyblade cards shows the order. Red is stopped by yellow, which is stopped by green, which is stopped by blue, which is stopped by red. So if you play a yellow card, your opponent needs to use a green card to counter it. You can then counter that green card with a blue card, and so on back and forth until one of you runs out of cards of the appropriate color. At this point, if the winning card has a trophy effect, it activates, and if it was the original attacker who won, you compare the battle edge of the winning card to the opponent's Beyblade, and for every hit, they lose one spin, discarding that many cards from their spin pile. If you lose all your spin, you're eliminated, and the last one standing wins. If the defending player won the battle, though, no spin is lost by either side. Either way, all of the cards played by both sides are discarded, and the turn ends. Alternatively, you don't have to play a card during your turn if you don't want to. Instead, you can discard your entire hand and draw 5 new cards. Regardless, you must have exactly 5 cards in your hand at the end of the turn. When the turn ends, both players draw back up to 5, or discard if they have more. If your deck runs out of cards, you just shuffle your discard pile to make a new one. The rules actually support more than 2 players at once, which is pretty nice. A lot of trading card games discount this possibility, even good ones like Yu-Gi-Oh!, and it's always cool to see one that realizes people might want to play with a larger group of friends.
And that's pretty much it. When I said this game was for babies, I wasn't kidding. In fact, what I just described are actually the advanced rules. There's a basic version that's even simpler. It's so simple that it can be played by kids who haven't even learned how to read yet. Yes, really. They made a trading card game for toddlers.
When playing with the basic rules, you completely ignore the different card types, the effect text, pretty much everything except the color and battle edge. You still set down your Beyblade separate from your main deck and make a spin pile beneath it, but every other card is treated like an action card and none of them do anything else. You just clash back and forth until someone runs out of spin. Really going after that lucrative 2 to 4 market, huh, Decipher? I mean, I guess that's fair. It's not like 2-year-olds don't have any disposable income. You know what's crazy? This game is so simple that this is probably going to end up being a shorter video just because I don't have a lengthy series of design criticisms to make this time. Just a couple of really big ones. The first and most obvious thing is the hand refill. My opinion of this type of mechanic is well established already, so I'm going to stick to the short version.
Card advantage part of strategic play. Hand refill, no card advantage. Game have shallow strategy.
That said, since it's not uncommon to end up playing a bunch of cards at once in almost every battle, the hand refill is a bit of a necessary weasel in this case.
But that doesn't mean I have to like it. And actually, that segues nicely into my next point. The color system is a lot more restrictive than it first appears.
There are a lot of effects that work well with specific colors, which makes you think that it might be worthwhile to build a deck emphasizing 1 or 2 colors, but then you won't be able to stop your opponent's attacks if they're the wrong color, which makes it really easy for a bad matchup to become an outright unwinnable game. So you're essentially forced to have a more or less even mix of all 4, which greatly cuts down the potential for creative deck building.
And in practice, the battle system as a whole ends up being far less interesting than intended, too.
I get the idea. The players are supposed to go back and forth, piling their cards high as they counter each other's moves in a grueling stalemate. But since the maximum hand size is only 5 cards, you're rarely going to see more than 2 or 3 cards played in one battle.
And actually, there are some pretty easy solutions for all of this. Increasing the hand size, maybe to 7 or 8, would make battles last longer and make them feel more tense and exciting. And improving the color system comes down to 2 simple words. Multicolored cards. Think about it. If there were cards that counted as 2 or even 3 of the colors, that would let them interact with more card effects, opening up deck building for more experimentation, and it would make them easier to use in battle since they'd be able to counter a greater number of cards at the expense of being easier to counter themselves. It could be an interesting risk-reward thing, and the game honestly feels pretty lacking without it. But that might be a bit too complicated for the age group they were targeting with this. And that's unfortunately where most of the game's problems really stem from. The whole game is way too basic. When you need to account for a set of basic rules where the players may not even know how to read, that greatly restricts the design space you can explore, even in the advanced rules.
There are even cards that have no effect text at all. I swear, when I opened my first pack and saw this, I thought it was a misprint.
There's also this nonsense.
In addition to 11 cards, every booster pack contains a random sticker sheet with these little decals shaped like the card frame. And yes, that is where you're supposed to put them. Let's appeal to the kids by giving them stickers they can use to customize their cards. For starters, all the kids young enough to like this idea probably lack the manual dexterity to properly align stickers this tiny with the frame.
Even I couldn't get them completely centered, and I'm an adult. Allegedly.
But it's also just a terrible idea on the face of it.
Hey bro, I've got a perfect idea for how we can improve our collectible card game, bro. Let's encourage our players to put stickers all over their cards, ruining the collector's value.
Bro, you're a goddamn genius, bro.
To be fair, with how hard this game failed, it's not like the cards are worth anything now anyway, so sticker away! Ultimately, the Beyblade trading card game was doomed from the get-go by its very premise. A TCG aimed at little kids isn't a bad idea in a vacuum, but frankly, it was a poor choice of license. If you want a kid-focused card game to succeed, you need a license with universal child appeal. Something that every kid ever already likes. What are little kids into these days? Peppa Pig? Fork Knife? I'm 28 years old. I don't know what kids like. Paw Patrol? That's a thing, right? Wait, is that dog a cop? ACAB. All cops are... Beyblade, as successful as it was, is still very much a niche property. They were never going to get the kind of sales they needed on the strength of a license alone, and any older card game enthusiast would find the gameplay too simplistic to be much fun. It's not a bad game, but there's nothing particularly special about it beyond the bizarre fact that a Beyblade TCG exists at all to begin with. Definitely a rare misfire for Decipher, and after the debut Collision set, the Beyblade trading card game died a swift, merciful death, never receiving a single expansion. These days you can find it online pretty cheap, but I mean, why would you want it? As for Decipher themselves, the company still exists, but they're a shell of what they once were. Until the next time you pay me a visit, this is Craig bidding you farewell from the Dungeon of the Discarded. Special thanks to my $15 and up patrons, Bunny89. You are the reason I can keep doing this. You have my undying gratitude. Thank you so much. ACAB, assigned cop at birth. Man, you need to be multiple layers of extremely online to get that one. This is why I suck at writing jokes. This is the kind of esoteric nonsense I find funny.